Is the Great Pyramid of Giza actually 25,000 years old? Welcome, time travelers, to Mike's Morning Mug. I'm actually making this discussion public this morning. For those that are unfamiliar, you can find many of these Mike's Morning Mug videos on my Patreon or the Connected Universe portal. Okay, is the Great Pyramid of Giza actually 25,000 years old per new scientific dating that's been applied to the erosion of the pyramid itself? So Alberto Danini, an engineer from the University of Bologna, has applied what he calls Relative Erosion Method to the Great Pyramid of Giza, and according to his findings, he is dating the Great Pyramid to 25,000 years old. So yes, a bit more than 20,000 years older than previously thought. So what gives here, and what about King Khufu, who is attributed to have built this around 2580 BC? Well, here's the thing about the ancient Egyptians that we always have to keep in mind. Many of these kings were not necessarily the original builders, but restorers of ancient works. And when they restored these ancient works, they put their own name on top of them. The biggest culprit is Ramses II. What he would do is he would go along and he would scrape off the previous king's name, because many times the hieroglyph cartouches were raised, and he'd scrape those off and then he'd apply his own name on it. So it actually makes it a challenge to date a lot of Egyptian antiquities, because we can say, oh, it's Ramses II, look, his name is on it. But we know Ramses II went around and did this sort of thing, but he's not the only one that did that. This was common practice. And in fact, Ramses was smart, and instead of using raised hieroglyphs for his cartouche, he actually embossed them and set them deep into the stone, making it much more of a challenge for people to come along after the fact and scrape off his name. So is that what happened with Khufu here? Well, what's interesting is that when it comes to Khufu, the only likeness that we find of him is a really, really tiny statue that's in the Egyptian Museum at Cairo. You would think that the guy who built the pyramids would have been emblazoned all over the place, huge monumental statues and all of these other things in his honor, but there aren't. Just a little tiny statue. There are some who believe that Khufu came along and performed a restoration project on the Great Pyramid and used it for his own purposes, but in doing so, angered the people. And after Khufu died, the people destroyed his likeness. Any statues that were in Khufu's honor were disassembled and repurposed. And in fact, here's a clip from our Stargates of Ancient Egypt tour, in which our guide, Mohammed Ibrahim, is talking about the restoration of the Great Pyramid.
This is the work of the Egyptian dynasties. So King Khufu didn't build the pyramid, but he restored the pyramid. And there is what we call it the tombs of the workers, not the builders of the pyramid, the restorers of the pyramid. Because you can see what I'm talking about. This is an ancient work from dynastic time, is to fill the gaps between the blocks. They were trying to preserve the stone. So why I'm showing you this? Because restoration was one of the biggest misleading ways to mislead us from truth, because many people did some restoration work and put their names, and we mistakenly believed that they are the original builders, but they were not. They were just the restorers.
We find the repurposing of material around Egypt very, very prevalent. For instance, the Red Shrine at Karnak. There was no red shrine at Karnak when we first came along and started restoring the temple. The blocks for that were used as filler. This was originally built by Hatshepsut. Some believe Thutmose III after her tore it down and used those blocks as filler for his projects. So again, this was common practice. And as far as the cartouche of Khufu being found inside one of the relieving chambers above the king's chamber, well, it's widely believed that Howard Weiss in the late 1800s came along and put that there himself, since he was pressured to find some sort of proof as to who built the Great Pyramid. So in many circles, it's considered a historic forgery. Okay, back to Alberto Danini and his Relative Erosion Method. What is this? Okay, so I'm just going to read what he says this Relative Erosion Method is. Danini says, the relative erosion method is based on the ratio between two types of erosion affecting the same type of rock in the same location, one with a known date and the other with a date to be determined. The ratio is then used to calculate the age of the stone block under examination. Okay, sounds like a bit of word salad, but really what he's talking about are the different types of erosion patterns that are around the Great Pyramid, on the blocks themselves, of course, on the plateau that's there, and then we also find within the Great Pyramid itself that not all the blocks were blocks that were quarried and brought there. Some of the Great Pyramid is actually the plateau itself. And so he's actually looked at the erosion pattern there as well, because this would have had to have been chiseled away and exposed to fit into the pyramid construction method. And we find water channeling erosion within that. In fact, this is something that we also point out on the Stargates of Ancient Egypt tour.
Something that's incredible about the Great Pyramid, everybody thinks that it's just carved flat here and then everything stacked on top. But you can actually see the original bedrock that is here. Like Muhammad was talking about, everything being connected like that. It helped to enhance the energies here. It also helped to stabilize the building and make it much more solid.
This block there was cut from the quarry and brought to here to be part of the construction. But the block behind, and this block here, and that one there, this is the bedrock itself. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and there's 3 more, 6 levels. This is the bedrock. So they didn't flatten the surface. The bedrock, as you can see, there is vertical erosion. Because, as I told you, they could remove the erosions doing the work. So I assume that the stone was perfect when they start building the pyramid. Okay? So one day, these blocks were covered with the exterior, the regular limestone, and then the casing stone.
So he's taken into account things like the foot traffic that has increased over time there around the Great Pyramid, the fact that sand would have covered the area for great periods of time, and then the water erosion that would have occurred since this was 25,000 years old, that would have been during a wetter time of Egypt's history. And in fact, it's that water erosion that was used in redating the Sphinx back in the early 1990s by John Anthony West and Robert Schoch. So of course this is controversial, and we saw what happened last year when the Khafre project came out and started talking about there being large chambers underneath the Giza plateau. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we progress with this line of research now and erosion patterns that are there on the Giza plateau. And as a interesting little side bit, if you walk around the Great Pyramid, you can find ancient fossils of sea lions that have been there for millions of years that are embedded within the limestone. So then the big question is, if the Great Pyramid of Giza is 25,000 years old, who in the long ancient history of Egypt actually built it? That's a topic for another day. All right, time travelers. Till next time, if time really exists.